Well, hello there. We have ourselves here a night action somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula. On defense, we have Qatar AMX-30s with active infrared. On the aggressor side, we have LeClerc tanks with thermal intensifiers. And we'll see what happens with these technical differences during this combat. The first phase of the turn is Cohesion. But because this is the first turn of the game, there's no cohesion effects to resolve yet. So we'll skip Cohesion this time and move on to supporting fire. Again, because this is the first turn and the aggressors, who are in motion, go first, there is no supporting fire yet. So we move on to movement. As the game continues, these phases will start taking longer. So now we're in the movement phase of the first turn for the first player, the aggressors. In this case are LeClercs from the United Arab Emirates. When they begin moving, vehicles that are eligible to detect and fire on them get to roll for those detections. Because it's nighttime, we have a number of modifications to the basic chance to detect. So if we look at the detection chart, we see that the base detection range to a stationary vehicle at night is 0. And the base range to a vehicle moving more than 4 movement points, which is functionally more than 4 inches, is 10. But we also see that you cannot exceed the range limit for the device you are using to see at night. So our crews here on the defense are not running their active searchlights. Because of that, their base detection range will never be over 5 inches. So we'll start moving LeClercs and we'll see if the nearest platoon detects the vehicles as they move. Now, LeClerc has a base movement rate of 22. They don't have to move that far, but they can. So here we have our first vehicle moving. And here they're going to attempt a detection. It's over 5 inches, but they have a chance to detect it. We roll, and they succeed. So this tank is now aware of this moving LeClerc and can attempt to fire. Turn its turret, so that's 1 point, modifying its chance to hit. And furthermore, at this range, firing a 105mm heat round, your base chance is 10. You've turned a turret, that's 1. You've got a moving target, that's 2. So we're down to a 7 to hit. The LeClerc crew, now alerted to the dangers, has a number of possibilities. One thing it can do, which it will, is turn. So it's a strong forward armor is facing the enemy, and stop. So there's our first vehicle stopped, and when we get to advancing fire, he will be able to return fire on the defender. Had he been aware of the defender's presence before it fired, he could have declared a gun duel and shot back. So now we have our other LeClercs. They're going to go ahead and do their moves. They're now aware of an enemy out there. So they'll move not as far. 2 of them will remain in motion. And the same thing will happen with these vehicles here. They will come forward and come to a halt. And with these short measures, you don't have, of course, to measure everything, as long as you and your opponent are satisfied. So that's the end of the movement phase, with 2 vehicles in motion and 2 stopped. The defenders can now go into defensive final fire for anyone else eligible to fire. And as we can see, we have at least 2 other vehicles that have a chance. So the second and third vehicles in the front line here have turned on their infrared searchlights, which they can choose to turn on or off at any opportunity to fire. And now they're going to try and find and fire on targets. So this nearest vehicle has a target right in front of them. They're within 10 inches. So basically, again, he's got a moving target. His base chance to hit is 10. This is fire. The first fire phase against an enemy you've just detected, so that's going to be a point. That also affected the first fire over to the side. There's also moving target, so we go from 10 to 7, so he's got a good chance to hit. However, this vehicle is going now aware of him, so he is going to attempt a gun duel. So we'll run his numbers in just a second. Now we know this vehicle is at a 7, and they miss. The return fire now, you have a vehicle that is in advancing fire, functionally, although this is still happening during the movement phase. So, his base chance is 10, however, this is advancing fire. Stabilized vehicle takes us to a 9, and then we do the fire after moving, takes us to 8, and then this is a director fire control system, so we're at 7. So the moving vehicle has a pretty good chance to hit. 7 is what we hit. So now we have 120 millimeter APFSDS, because that is what the LeClercs have. This chart has depleted uranium, but in fact it is a tungsten round because it is not the French army. So we look at the chart and we compare it to the armor on the AMX-30, which we find out is 5. So when we look at the chart, we see that we have a to-kill number of 11. It's almost certainly going to kill this vehicle. And it does. So this vehicle now has been destroyed. And we'll just take the turret off to note it. And this vehicle here has advanced fired. We have one more vehicle that wants to defensive fire. That's this one here. So now we measure to make sure it's within the visual range for his searchlight, and it is not. So now we're looking at a shot outside visual range. He's got a target he's firing at, so he certainly knows he's there. You can see the fire from the target, so he certainly knows where the target is. But once again, he's missed. So just to run through what would happen if he did hit, he's firing a heat round, it's 105 millimeter. So then we look at the heat 105 millimeter entry for the front armor on the LeClerc, which is 11, and we can see it cannot in fact penetrate. So they're going to have a nasty discovery once they start scoring hits. Alright, since that has finished the defensive fire, we now go to advancing fire. And we have one vehicle that is stationary, and he is now firing at a range of 6 to 12. It's just over 6. So he only pays the following penalties for his fire. He pays, he moved, and he stabilized, and he's firing at advancing fire. That's 2 points. So he goes from a 10 to 8 to hit. And he hits. Now he's hit the side armor, so once again he's extremely likely to destroy the tank. And he does. And this time, if we were tracking crew survival, this one is on fire, so there's no chance to survive. Now that we're in advancing fire, we need to do a detection roll for vehicles that are not within the automatic detection range. In this case, we're looking at moving vehicles that have thermal intensifiers, which gives them a base range 20 to a stationary vehicle. If they are moving and they have a director fire control system, it takes them down 5 to 15. In addition, we have some vehicles that are stationary, so their base range is 20. So looking back here at our stationary AMX-10Ps, you can see that they can automatically detect the 3 vehicles in front, and with a good roll, they can see even further. They can in fact see these vehicles here at the end of the ridge as well. Now they've come to a stop, so they can fire their anti-tank guided missiles if they wish. They have Milans. So, pulling out the AMX-10P card, we can see that the Milans are wire-guided SACLOS. They have thermal intensifier scopes as well. So the crew on one of these AMX-10Ps can fire a Milan at this vehicle. The range is 17 to 20. We look to hit for a Saklos weapon. We are looking at a base of 10 again. They have moved in the movement phase and they are now stopped. So they take a much larger penalty because they are non-turreted. It takes them more time to acquire a target. So they go from 10 to 7, and they had moved, so they're at 6. They're within 20, so that's the limit of the modifiers. Here comes the fire, and they miss. So now, because the Milan is a single load weapon, they will have to spend a movement phase reloading it before they can fire it again. And that concludes the first turn of movement for our aggressor side. Our defenders now, our lead platoon has lost 50% losses, has lost its commander, randomly determined. So their cohesion drops from a base of 10 in the case of this unit to they were surprised. That's a point. And they have lost the unit commander, that's 2 more. And they've taken 50% losses. So their base cohesion has dropped all the way to 5. I roll a 7. The unit is now in a CN2. It may halt, but fire as ordered. As part of the cleanup, once one player's side's phases are done, we remove all advancing defensive fire counters. At this time, if the defenders had air or artillery assets, they would attempt to contact them. If either side had a vehicle that had been placed in an unknown state by fire, we would now resolve it. Now that the forward platoon has failed its cohesion roll, we know it will not be moving this turn. It makes sense for them anyway to remain in the position they were in and attempt to do supporting fire. So they'll do that now. We have this vehicle here. It's firing at a range of just over 10 inches at a moving target. It's using its infrared searchlight, but the target is outside of the range for the infrared searchlight. So he's going to pay the penalty for firing in the dark. His base to hit at this range is 10. He's firing in the dark, which takes him down by 3, at a moving target, which takes him to 5. So he's going to roll to hit again. He's missed. Or he would have, but he's rolled a 6. And he's firing at the same target he fired at previously, which gives him a 1-point advantage. So now we have a 105mm heat round, striking 9 points of front armor. So when we check, 11 points of front armor. So when we check the chart, we can see that this round automatically fails to penetrate the explosive reactive armor on the front of the LeClerc. So that's his supporting fire, which is fair. The defending commander now has a difficult decision to make, but since he is behind the crest of a ridge and he knows the enemy is coming, he decides that his best move is to await events and ambush them as they come over. That leaves only the right-hand platoon potentially in contact with the enemy. So rather than move at this time, they're just going to turn their turrets to face the enemy. This concludes the defender's first turn, and we go back into cohesion for our aggressors. Now, they've been under fire, but they've taken no casualties, and they have a supporting unit. So their base cohesion of 10, which is what's assigned to this tank unit, becomes an 11 with the 1 modifier. They pass easily. And now we're in their supporting fire phase. The only vehicles which can supporting fire are those that are not in motion. So in the event, we have our anti-tank guided missile crews in the back, and they're using their thermal intensifiers. So we have the right-hand vehicle here. It's going to repeat his fire on this. I roll an 8, and they have lost another tank. Now we're in supporting fire, and the only units eligible to supporting fire are those that are not already in motion. Now, this AMX here has fired. They cannot fire their anti-tank guided missile again until they reload it, which he'll do during the movement phase. The next one, however, can fire now. His base chance to hit is 10, and we check the range to make sure he is within sighting distance for the thermal intensifier. We see he is under 20, so he has a target and is only modified by the intervening terrain. So a 10 becomes a 9. He fires his Milan, getting a hit. Now this Milan is a medium heat projectile, and checking the AMX-30 chart, we see it has 5 armor. So this is an extremely likely kill. The TK number is 11. This means that a 12 will do nothing because 12 is always ineffective. An 11 will stun the target. 10 or less will eliminate it. I roll an 8, and they have lost another tank. Having concluded the only support fire they wish to do, we now go on into movement phase. The aggressors are not aware of all the forces on the other side of the hill, so they're going to roll right on into them. Now the movement rate of the LeClerc is 22, and we're going to pay an inch for uphill and downhill movement. So here is our first vehicle. It'll come right over the hill. There's plenty of movement for that. At this point, they're automatically detected because they're within 5 of these vehicles, which are waiting. They can switch on their infrared searchlights now and fire. So this vehicle will do so. The range is under 2, so we give them a bonus to hit. So this is a snapshot. They've just seen the target. So they go from 10 to 9. The target is moving. They go to 7. The proximity takes them back up to 8. They hit and discover once again they cannot penetrate the frontal armor. Now, this vehicle, having suddenly detected the enemy, is going to stop right there. And when it does, that's going to pull fire from here. So here we have infrared searchlight firing at a stationary target now, so they pay for snap fire. So they go from 10 to 9, and they are firing uphill, so we are looking at an 8. They hit, and this time they have hit the side armor. So we find we have 105 millimeter heat striking the side armor of a LeClerc, which is 5. The base chance to kill is 10. However, the LeClerc has explosive reactive armor, which lowers this number to 7. No effect. We now continue the movement phase for the aggressors. This vehicle had stopped. He now pays a point to go into motion, a point to turn. Now his forward motion is going to take him over the hill, which will add 2 points to his movement as he comes down. So he's hearing on the radio about the opposition, so he can drive out and pick his position in relation to where he's heard there's fire coming from. He does that. He comes here and finishes his move, remaining in motion. Having moved there and turned his turret, he now comes under fire from this vehicle here, assuming they detect them, which they will do on an 8 or less, because it is over 5 inches. They detect him, turn on the searchlight and fire. And now an interesting situation has happened here, because there are 2 different facings on the vehicle. If this is a hull hit, it will be the front armor. If it is a turret hit, it will be the side armor. It will be a turret hit if the colored die is lower than the white, assuming it hits it all. It hits, strikes the hull, and it being 105 millimeter heat against 11 armor cannot penetrate. We resume the action, having completed the movement for our aggressors. At this point, they can advance and fire, and they will pay some modifiers to do so. Our lead vehicle here is still in motion, so he is going to pay all 3 of our cases for firing. He starts off with a 10, but he is a stabilized vehicle, firing during advancing fire takes him to 9. He's in motion. Firing advancing fire after moving, that takes him to 8. He's still in motion with director fire control system, which means he is at a 6. Now the director fire control system at this range puts a point back, so he's at a 7. So here he is firing at this vehicle. And again, although the turret is turned, it's a side hit no matter what. So we have a hit, and this being basically 2 armor being struck by 120mm APFSDS, the to kill chance is an 11. So again, any roll other than 11 or 12 will destroy the tank. Roll a 10 and the tank is destroyed. Alright, now we're at the conclusion of advancing fire for our aggressors. As you can see, they've taken a couple more of the enemy's tanks out, and now this takes us to the turn 2 cohesion phase for our defenders. At this point, they still have their overall commander, but they've taken casualties in 2 more platoons, the command platoon and this platoon here. So, base cohesion for this group back here is 10. They're still alright. This unit here is taking 50% casualties. It has a supporting unit, so its cohesion right now is 9. Succeeds. This unit has taken 25% casualties. Same situation will be at a 9, and they're alright. So, at least we know they're willing to stick around. And as always, as we're going into a new sides turn, we remove support fire, defensive fire, and advancing fire. This battle slightly resembles that at 73 Easting. However, we gave the defenders an advantage over the historical battle in that they were actually in their tanks and alert. The Iraqis much more greatly outnumbered the Americans in their engagement, but they were not in their vehicles and they were not ready for combat at all.